Greetings, fellow Doctor Who fans, and welcome to a special high-def edition of Who on Who, the podcast devoted to the review of classic series Doctor Who DVDs in no particular order. Now, after saying that, I have to admit to you that on this episode, I will be reviewing something that is neither a classic episode nor really a DVD. As you can tell from the title card, today I'm going to be actually reviewing the Blu Ray release of the David Tennant adventure Planet of the Dead. But before I go into that, I would like to read you some feedback emails that I've gotten from the listeners.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
Alright, well, before I go any further, first I'd like to apologize for my pipes. My throat is a little scratchy. I'm dealing with some, some sort of sinus issue or something like that. So if I do sound a little bit off, that's probably pertaining to that. But before I read the first email, I would like to thank both Luke Harrison and Mary Freer, who wrote to me to help sort of flesh out the confusion that I had when I was reviewing An Unearthly Child. I made an offhanded comment about Susan saying that the Americans had the decimal system in place, and I finally figured out through what they both wrote me that I was confusing the term decimal with metric, because when I was in school as a lad, we were taught the metric system here in America with the intent that we would be adopting that system, and that obviously did not happen. We still use the other measurement system of, feet, inches, and all that. But yes, we do indeed use the decimal system with money, and I may have discussed this a little bit on my last podcast as well, but I just wanted to thank them for taking the time to, in a very nice and positive way, sort of help point out where my misgivings were with that, or where my misinformation was, I guess you would say. So thank you to that. Also, Mary Freer wrote me a very nice email that says, just thought I'd let you know that my copy of the Five Doctors 25th Anniversary Edition arrived today, a purchase inspired by your review. The great discussion you had of the extras made me think it was necessary for me to own the disc. Well, of course it is, Mary. It's necessary to own all the discs sooner or later, right? She writes, I'm a lifelong fan of Doctor Who, but actually own very little. My sister and I owned a few VHS copies, but we've never bought any DVDs. We are both renting the whole available catalog from a UK rental service, Love Film. I'm currently up to Tom Baker's Doctor, who has always been my favorite. With the new series being released from the archives, I have to drop back every now and again. It's a great journey to be on, though. The cost of buying them is all but prohibitive at the moment, but there are a few that I will purchase in time. Tomb of the Cybermen, Pyramids of Mars, Genesis of the Daleks, the Beginning box set, and the Two Doctors being high on the list. Mary, I just want to say that those are all fantastic choices and all excellent stories. I believe I have reviewed, Tomb of the Cybermen, Pyramids of Mars, and of course Unearthly Child out of the Beginning box set. I do have the Two Doctors, and I also have Genesis of the Daleks, and those are high on my list to get to very soon. She says, I would like to hear you discuss your favorite Doctors and companions in an episode. I haven't caught up yet, so maybe you have already. Thanks again for the great podcast, Mary. Mary, thank you for the email. I thought about this actually long and hard after I read this email from you. Trying to remember if I ever have made any comments here or there. I know that I have commented on not being an initial fan of the Sixth Doctor, but in time I have come around to actually really enjoy the Sixth Doctor quite a bit. I'm also a fan of the Seventh Doctor, while many people seem to disparage the Seventh Doctor's stories, and there are probably more of his stories that are lacking than there are typically good stories. I just particularly love that facet of the Doctor's personality, the schemer, and the one that seemed to be several steps ahead of everybody else, sort of thing. But as far as a favorite, I know that typically a lot of people say that their favorite doctor is their first doctor. And my first doctor was Peter Davison, and in many ways probably is my favorite, or was. But actually, when I look back honestly at all 10 doctors, I have to say that there are facets of each doctor that I truly, truly love, and there are things about them that I don't particularly care for, just like any human being. And you sort of look past the flaws of whomever and decide if you're going to invest in what you see that is good. And I've always invested in the doctor, and all 10 of them, or all 10 of him, I guess you would say, because the idea of regeneration and the idea of I love multi-doctor stories. I've said that before. The idea of regeneration has always fascinated me very, very much. And for those of you who aren't aware of this, the guys over at Podshock right now are actually covering they're reviewing all of the regeneration stories, starting with the 10th Planet, with the first Doctor regenerating into the second Doctor, whose first story is Power of the Daleks, and then they're going on to the War Games. I think they just finished, and they're getting ready to review Spearhead from Space, which will be the third Doctor's first story. So if you have not checked those out, you need to go to www.podshock.net and listen to those reviews. But in finishing up in your question, Mary, I think I would have to say that my favorite Doctor is the next Doctor. And when I say the next Doctor, I don't mean David Morrissey's next Doctor from this past Christmas special. I actually mean that for me, it's always the excitement of what is the new guy going to bring in that's different. And it's sort of like well, in many ways it's like Christmas when you come downstairs and the gifts are under the tree and we sit down to it's the anticipation of what is there more than anything else. And so for me, my favorite Doctor is always going to be the next one, just because I'm dying to see what they do different. You know, the costume, the whole thing, and of course we're right in the middle of that right now, with starting to get pictures of Matt Smith and his costume and all that. But that's a discussion for another time. But I would have to say that is probably that is where I would go with my favorite Doctor. With my favorite companion, I would have to say really any companion that was more than just a screamer. I've always been fond of the action-oriented male companion, like Ian Chesterton for the first Doctor, or of course Jamie. Also loved when Captain Jack traveled with the Ninth Doctor, because I don't want the Doctor to be that guy that kicks the door in, guns blazing, but the American in me wants to see that sometimes. I want to see, somebody throw a punch occasionally, even if it's just out of frustration, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right action. But it's a natural reaction. I think for anyone, I don't care how evolved or advanced society you are. At some point, you're going to get frustrated and just want to cold cock somebody. And so I enjoy having that as an option with the Doctor and with the Doctor's companions. And to that extent, I also like the companions who are very fleshed out. Always liked Ace. I liked Rose to a point. Early on, I loved Rose, and especially with the Ninth Doctor. But toward her end of her tenure with the 10th Doctor, and the fact that she sort of keeps coming back, like, in my opinion, like a bad rash, and that's nothing against Billie Piper or her portrayal, but I'm just sort of over seeing Rose at this point. I actually was one of the people that really liked Martha Jones as a companion. I thought that Martha was great, and anybody that can hold her own or hold his own against the Doctor in strength of personality. I mean, obviously they're not going to match wits with him intellectually and that sort of thing, but I think that's where I'm going with that. Is that I'm just looking for somebody that can challenge the Doctor as much as he challenges them. So those are just a few of the companions that I like. There have been many more that I have liked than I haven't liked. So that list would be far too long to really go into here. But Mary, again, thank you for the question and welcome. Mary has also joined the forums over at whoonwho.com. And she friend requested me on Facebook, so she has jumped in with both feet. And I appreciate the gusto, and I appreciate the email as well. This next email comes from a gentleman named Dave Keep from Crawley in the UK. Dave says, "Hi David, just a brief fan letter. My first for about 30 years. I can honestly say that I'm a lifelong Doctor Who fan, as my brother was born in 1959 and the show was on every week when I popped along in early 1964. Your listeners may be the only people not to think it's sad that my first memory was the Emperor Dalek on Evil of the Daleks. Anyways, I got an iPod about 3 months ago and discovered the World of Doctor Who podcast in about 2 minutes, and have been catching up on all the episodes of Podshock, Tin Dog, et al. Since I have just discovered Who on Who, and have spent far too much time of the weekend listening to the show. As a nerd," and he says that, say it loud and say it proud in parentheses, "I love the way that you co-host with podcasters from other shows, as it reminds me of the Brave and the Bold comic books." Anyways, he also mentioned on my website that we have the Frapper map up on the website, and some people have put their locations in, listening to from around the world, and wanted me to point out that he's in Crawley in the UK, and if anybody else is in that area and they would like to ring him up, he would love to meet with anyone there, form sort of a local group, if you will. He says, "Many thanks for the fantastic podcast." Dave, thank you. Thank you very much for listening, and welcome to the world of podcasts, of Doctor Who podcasts. And, what can I say about the pedigree of shows that you're listening to? Podshock, WhoCast, Tin Dog. Thank you for throwing my show in the mix there. I feel very humbled to be in the group there. I might also recommend to you Radio Free Skaro, which is a great podcast, as well as the Cultum Collective podcast, which doesn't specifically center in on Doctor Who, but but they do discuss it along with Torchwood and a lot of other things as well. So there are plenty out there to listen to. I certainly appreciate you taking a little bit out of your time, and I love the comic book reference of Brave and the Bold. I will go ahead and make myself Batman, and any co-hosts that I have will be some sort of B-list DC comic superhero that comes in to raise awareness, I guess. But thank you very much for that as well. All right. Well, before we go any further, let's go ahead and get the TARDIS control set. This is going to be an easy jump for us because we're only going back less than a year here. We're going back to last Easter to catch the 10th Doctor in Planet of the Dead. And this is the Blu Ray release. So everybody, hang on. Here we go. Most of you are thinking. You're thinking, no, wait a second. Last episode of Who on Who, when I reviewed Battlefield, at the very end of the podcast, I said that in my next episode, I was going to be reviewing City of Death, not Planet of the Dead. Not to mention the fact that Planet of the Dead is in no way, shape, or form a classic episode of the classic, or an episode of the classic series. And I also said that I was going to be reviewing City of Death not solo, but with the mysterious podcaster from across the pond, the Tin Dog himself, from the Tin Dog podcast. And yes, those things are very true, and I did say that, and that is still coming. I will be reviewing City of Death with the Tin Dog himself. from the Tin Dog podcast. But due to both of us having some scheduling misfires, it just wasn't going to happen. And I didn't want there to be too much time to lapse in between Who on Who podcasts. I wanted to get something out there. And I had this Blu Ray disc sitting here. I was very excited about watching. And while technically it's not classic, I understand that. I also have come to accept the fact that the classic library, if you will, is finite. And at some point, if this podcast is going to have any legs and stay around for a while, I'm going to end up going through all the available classic DVDs at some point, money allowing. And then I'm going to have to maybe start looking at the 2005 series as adding that into the review. And technically, by then, they could almost be considered classic because, let's face it, they're already almost 5 years old now. So anyway, I'm making a little bit of a jump here. This is the very first Doctor Who Blu Ray disc that I believe has ever been available. I know for a fact it's the first one ever available here in America. I do have a Blu Ray player, and so I was absolutely just excited as all to have this disc in my collection where I could sit down and watch it. So today, actually, I sat down with my 9-year-old son Ian, and we watched Planet of the Dead together. It was my second time seeing it, and his first time, but it was my first time on Blu Ray in high definition. So, with that being said, let me also point out that there have been a ton of reviews by fellow podcasters out there about this story when it first aired. I know the guys at Podshock talked about it. I know that it was reviewed on Tin Dog. I'm sure that a lot of other podcasts covered it as well. Most of you have seen this, so I'm only going to spend a few minutes really giving you my take on the actual story itself. I think I could sum it up best really in one word: filler. I mean, it's a fun story, but nothing earth-shattering happens, nothing game-changing happens, nothing that is going to be something that is going to come back in the Doctor Who universe later that I can, foresee. David Tennant turns in a fantastic performance as the Doctor, and he does what he does best. He brings a lot of energy and a lot of charm to an otherwise, relatively flat story. There are huge plot holes that have been discussed before about this. There's a certain air of lightness to this, as far as, I don't want to call it silliness, but there's not a lot of gravitas to this story. There's not a lot of heaviness there, but it's okay. It's a Doctor Who special. I think that it wouldn't be. I think it would even be more okay. Let me phrase it this way, with Doctor Who fans, if this was one of those episodes that was thrown in the middle of a 13-episode season, or series as you refer to it over in the UK. I think we can accept those better, and we can like them for what they are. But given that we have a limited number of specials this year, and a limited amount of time left with David Tennant's 10th Doctor before he regenerates, I think we're all expecting the bar to be a little bit higher. And, there was a lot of press release about them filming in Dubai. There was a lot about the bus getting damaged. I mean, it's a beautiful location, on and on and on and on. I think we can all agree on that. But I'm just thinking that there just wasn't enough there for the story. Okay, it was one of those things where it just appeared like a decent story idea was put out there. Then the production team immediately went to work on the who, what, where, when, and why of how they were going to film it, and the story was never really fleshed out. So overall, just judging the story itself, I would not give the story high marks. So I was really hoping that the Blu Ray disc would bring more to the table. And I will say this about the Blu Ray. The Blu Ray disc itself is beautiful. The transition to 1080p, high def, wow. Okay? Even if you don't want to buy this disc, If you have access to a Blu-ray player, you need to see this. In high def, it is so good. I wish that we could have seen the TARDIS interior, but I understand why they didn't do it and all of that. So, that's okay. But man, the video, just the quality of it, everything was just phenomenal. Same with the sound. I got to give it that. But that's where the compliments have to end for me, and here's why. One of the reasons that I invested in a Blu-ray disc player and started buying Blu-ray discs over DVDs, yes, it was for the picture quality, yes, for the sound quality, but one of the main things for me is all the fantastic extras and things that can be afforded on a Blu-ray disc that just can't be squeezed into a DVD. There are just some wonderful, wonderful Blu-rays out there that have some amazing special features. The pop-up info text, the commentaries where you can see the people doing the commentary in a little window down the corner, some interactive material, all of that. And there was so much they could do. But I got to be honest with you, there are no special features on this disc other than the fact that they do show you the preview for Waters of Mars, and they show you the Doctor Who Confidential, and that's fine. But it doesn't, for me, doesn't even rate setting up an extras section on this podcast to discuss the extras, because that's it. I was really, really disappointed. Now, the only saving hope I have at this point is this. This has been said over Podshock already by Louis Trapani, and I'm hoping that he is correct in his presumption that all of these Doctor Who specials will be packaged together into a box set after we're done this coming Christmas. And if that is to be the case, perhaps then they will throw the appropriate extras into a Blu-ray box set. But that's all just speculation at this point, and really no way to know for sure if that is really going to happen. So until then, I just have to basically judge this review based off of what I'm holding in my hands right now, which is the NTSC Region 1 Blu-ray release of Doctor Who Planet of the Dead. Am I glad I bought it? Yes, absolutely. Because like I've said before, I'm a completist. If it's out there, I want to have it, or I have a plan to get it at some point. So, I'm glad I have it, especially because I do enjoy watching Blu-ray. And again, the video quality is great. But was I disappointed that there wasn't more to it? Absolutely. I was very much disappointed. I've just recently purchased the original Star Trek series, Season 1, on Blu-ray. And that was done well. That was done right. If you have access to that, just check out those special features. Check out the commentaries and the documentaries and everything else on there. And I mean, wow. They just did such a loving and great job with that. So please, BBC, if you're listening, To Entertain, if you're listening out there, let's do something with these Blu-ray releases, even if it means making us wait another month or two. But let's get something on there that makes it worth buying the Blu-ray, other than just the better quality video. Alright, so that being said, overall, here is my Cloister Bells. I'm going to give Planet of the Dead 3.5 out of 5 Cloister Bells, just because it's fun, because at this time of this year, in 2009, we are wanting for Doctor Who, and so any Doctor Who is good Doctor Who, and because the video and audio quality of it are so good. But all in all, I would like to have given it more, and I anticipate that maybe further down the road, in retrospect, I might change my mind, but for now, 3.5 out of 5. Alright, and sadly that brings us to an end of this special high-definition edition of Who on Who, but I promise you, next episode will be the promised review of City of Death, the Fourth Doctor story with my special guest co-host, the Tin Dog himself from the Tin Dog podcast. So please keep an eye on your RSS feeds. That will come very soon once we can get our schedules meshed up and we're both able to sit down and really give this great story the review that it deserves. In the meantime, let me go ahead and shout out to Graham Sheridan, to David Keep, and to Mary Freer, my new friends on Facebook. If you're out there and you're on Facebook and you would like to friend request me, please do. David Hooie, Hooie. Please be sure to include a personal message that you listen to the podcast so that I know, that it's not just some sort of random friend request out there. I appreciate that. You can also email me, david@whoonwho.com. And I am now going to try to start including some audio feedback. So if you have Skype, if you have access to it, you can call up Who on Who on Skype and leave a voicemail there. That would be fantastic. And assuming that it all works out technically, I will play those audio comments on future podcasts. I appreciate it. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you have a fantastic day, week, month, or let's not even go month. I don't want to wait that long until I talk to you again. But I hope you're all well, and I will talk to you again real soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.